Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we launch Adagio DocStore, a product of ours that we've been chatting about publicly since AOC last year, and that saw the light of day officially last week. We've been using it internally for some months, and actually approaching a year now, and we're very excited by this product. We think that it offers some really unique benefits, and we know that as accounting departments realize the benefits of storing documents electronically, it's becoming more and more a topic of interest within the community. I'm going to sit in the background for today's webinar and let Warren manage the proceedings. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the question box, and I'll answer questions on the fly while Warren does the presentation, and we'll get the show on the road. So Warren, I'll pass the baton to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. That's fabulous. Today we're going to be introducing Adagio DocStore, and we're really excited to present this to you. As Andrew's mentioned, we've been working on this for some time, and we just hope there's a number of wonderful features that will be available to you to make your accounting a lot more usable. So before we actually begin this presentation, just wanted to identify that we're in the midst of introduction. We'll spend just a couple of moments briefly showing the program that's called Adagio DocStore, but mostly we'll be spending our time in the actual Adagio programs and what features that Adagio DocStore awakens. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions. And as Andrew mentioned, please feel free to type into the questions area of the control panel if you have anything at any time during the session. So if there's anything that you'd like to ask, please feel free, and Andrew or others who are monitoring the questions will be able to answer those for you. So filing your accounting documents. Some people enjoy having the ability to have everything organized, and if they need to find a document from a historical year and they need to just go and get to the proper filing cabinet or accounting box and find their stuff. But this is an extremely time-consuming process, especially if you're in a higher volume company where you have tons of papers that you're going through, and it takes time to organize them properly, and it takes time to find the right box sometimes too. And we hope that Adagio DocStore is something that will make this headache go away, or certainly be a lot less. Before we begin the presentation, I'm interested to know just who our audience is today, as far as your experience with Adagio DocStore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch a poll and just ask the question, if you actually had a chance to see Adagio DocStore yet. Maybe this is your very first look, or maybe you've just watched some videos online, or maybe your Adagio consultant has given you a demonstration, and or you've actually even taken the plunge and have it installed and maybe even looked at it for the first time on your system. So I'll just wait till we have a few polls. I see we're about 3/4 of the way through. All right, so that's pretty good. I think we're almost done. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. We're at 93%. And just oops, for the people who are in the audience today, a good 2/3 of you, this will be the absolute first look. And some other people have had a chance, and I see 14% have even had a chance to install it. So that's fabulous. So we have a good wide range, but for many of you, this will be the first time. That's great. So let me just close that off. So for most of you, this will be new. What can Adagio DocStore do for you? Let's answer a few questions that Adagio DocStore can help out with. Perhaps you've received a paper in the mail. It's an invoice from one of your vendors, and you want to get it into your accounting. Of course, you can enter this as a batch and then file the paper away. But how much nicer would it be to create a brand new document and attach something directly, either something that's saved directly on your form, or perhaps even scan a document to an attached scanner, such as a ScanSnap scanner or a Twain integrated. Preview that scanner. You can hear it going in the background. And in a few moments, oops, there we go. We've got our document. We've written our GL account, so we know which account it's going to be expensed to. We'll save that document, and now it's viewable directly within the accounting. We can go ahead and enter that invoice. Oops. Get the right one, EAS. And enter that document as we see it on the screen. Of course, it could be on your paper too. Expense that to the proper account, $66.75. Okay. How cool is it to be able to see the transaction linked directly to your accounting in your batch? Or perhaps you've paid some invoices and someone's asked the question, which invoices did we pay? Of course, you can always go to the vendor, take a look at the transactions, and for a manual check or a system check, you can see a list of invoices, but you may not necessarily know what those invoices were. How cool would it be to be able to view the remittance advice that was generated when that manual check or system check or electronic fund transfer is generated, and see not only that remittance advice, but all the other advices and invoices and other attachments that that manual check was applied to. Or perhaps someone external would like to see those invoices. So what you can do is copy the remittance advice by multi-selecting all of those documents that are attached, then bring up a blank email. Oops, got to recopy those again. Bring up a blank email and paste those attachments into the blank email to send to someone external outside the office. That's pretty handy. I don't worry about saving that. And finally, perhaps you're monitoring the financial statements and you've noticed that your office expense was a little bit larger than usual for a selected period. Of course, you've always been able to drill down to see the posted transactions, but now you have the opportunity of actually linking to the actual visual of the document that's been scanned or copied and attached into your accounting. So you can see those documents directly from within a financial statement drill down. So those are three of potentially many types of questions that can be answered by attaching a document directly to within the accounting. We hope that some of those things look pretty cool. Oops. So what exactly is Adagio DocStore? We like to think of it as a virtual filing cabinet of PDF documents. It's not just a random place where a bunch of PDFs are crammed to all in one folder that you have to wade through over the months and years that you store these. But these are actually saved on your hard disk in a way that mimics a filing cabinet. Your customers and your vendors' PDFs are separated by customer or by vendor. And within each customer vendor, the types of documents, an invoice or a credit note or a check or remittance advice. We think that that will make it a lot easier not only to locate, but also be able to use within the accounting. If you're an Adagio ePrint user, Adagio DocStore is a replacement. So all the features that are available in Adagio ePrint are now available in DocStore as well, plus a number of new ones, some of which you've just seen just now. If you are on an upgrade plan for Adagio ePrint, you might have received an email already, and you have the opportunity of installing and using. You can do that at your leisure. Some of the features that you can wake up with Adagio DocStore, just as with ePrint, you can store your management reports as PDFs. So rather than having to print out your posting journal or your batch listings or a detail listing or an age trial balance or any of those other management reports from the reports menus in Adagio, you can instead save them in PDF and name them automatically, perhaps with a fiscal period or year or a batch number or posting sequence or a calculate as of date. So there's ways of organizing your management reports. You can also view and attach documents directly in the accounting transaction, some of which we've just seen today. This is available for all Adagio programs at version 9.3a or later. At the current time, there are 4 Adagio programs that support Adagio DocStore. Currently, those programs are Adagio Ledger, Payables, Purchase Orders, and Order Entry. And the other Adagio programs will be worked on, and some are in process of R&D right now. And so you'll see those 9.3a programs roll out as quickly as we can. And so any program that has version 9.3a will have all of the DocStore features enabled. If you're running a version of Adagio that is not at 9.3a, you still will be able to view PDFs in the same way that you could with Adagio ePrint. So you can view individual transactions, but there's not the same ability to attach additional transaction documents. And finally, you can not only see the individual document that you attach, such as the invoice, but you can also see the flow from before. So you can see the purchase orders or the receipts or the sales orders in addition to the invoice. And you can attach as many documents as you want with no degradation. So that means you can have a few or potentially dozens of transactions attached with documents, and you will not see any slowness in being able to post or to view your transactions. So we've talked about it a little bit. Let's take a closer look. The most part of using Adagio DocStore is waking up features in Adagio. But what I'd like to do is just spend just a couple of minutes, just a few minutes, to actually open the DocStore program itself, just to show that there is a program that comes along with DocStore. And you can access it from the toolbar, Adagio toolbar, or from the Adagio menu, or from a shortcut on your desktop. And there's just two different places I'd like to highlight. One is once you initially install DocStore, you do need to enable it. So at the bottom of the screen, there is a checkbox option that says Enable Doc Storage. So that needs to be turned on in order to wake up all of these features. Once you've done that, you would then want to set the base path for all the PDFs will be saved on your hard disk. Perhaps it will be just underneath your company data folder. Or perhaps it will be relative to some other external folder outside of the company data. That might be useful if you manage multiple companies and you like to have them separate. And one common place in a separate area of the hard disk other than your data area. Also, I'll just mention that if you're an ePrint user, and you also notice that you can store your report PDFs in the same way, either underneath the company data or to a folder of your choosing. And you can separate your transaction reports and your audit reports and your standard forms and general reports to separate folders for organization. So there's a tiny bit of setup. Once you turn that on, if you're an Adagio ePrint user, there's a process of taking all of those PDFs that you've saved over the last 6 years and have them automatically copied over to the appropriate place in DocStore with all the links created. So therefore, you don't have to start from scratch today, but you can actually start from when you started using ePrint. The second thing I'd like to show is just quickly that there's a way to view all of those doc storage PDFs. And that the way that they're stored on the hard disk is the way that they're viewed here. So there's a doc storage main folder, and then they're organized into separate folders, perhaps those just for customers, or for vendors, or for banks, and so on. And within the vendors folder, you'll have a separate folder for each of your vendors or customers, or so on. And within each of the vendors, you might have different transaction types. And then when you highlight a particular view, you can view the PDF from here. If you have a high volume of PDFs that you saved, there's also a find and a smart find search that allows you to locate these PDFs for searching easily. And finally, if you've been using this for a couple of years and you want to clean up the available viewed PDFs, there's also an archive year function that allows you to archive into separate fiscal years so that you can organize your documents by fiscal year and only have the current year available in the first threads above. So that's really all I wanted to show in the DocStore program itself. Let's spend the rest of our time in the Adagio itself and see the cool features that it wakes up. We've seen a couple already. So let's just take a look at an invoice batch. As I mentioned earlier, Adagio purchase orders is also at the 9.3a level, so therefore it supports being able to attach and documents in the DocStore way. When that batch is created in Adagio Payables from the day end and purchase orders, those documents will automatically have the attachments themselves. So perhaps you'll see the receipt and a purchase order. And this happens to have a second receipt and a second purchase order attached to this invoice. So all the different transactions that generated this has come in here. Anywhere you see this red sunglasses, or you can press F12 on your keyboard if you're using the keyboard, that will launch the View DocStore screen. If you edit a transaction, anywhere you see this paperclip, or you can press the F11 key on your keyboard, you have the capability of attaching a new document. Now, documents are automatically created if you set in the company profile archive PDF vendor copy or archive PDF customer copy. However, you can also attach external documents. So for example, if you had received a packing slip and you'd like to attach that and it's been saved already to your hard drive, I can say new and browse for the location, locate the PDF if it's already been saved on your hard disk, and say open. So now that Fed packing slip has been attached. And so we close that and we view, there's our packing slip along with the receipts and the invoices and so on. If you don't want that packing slip to show up first, you can reorganize it by going back to the paperclip and maintain documents. Make sure that's highlighted and move it down in the list if you wish. And so now when you view it, you'll get receipts first, then the packing slip and the purchase order. So if you already have a set of PDFs that have been saved to your hard disk, you can attach them by browsing for them. Perhaps what you do when you receive paper documents is you have someone scan them all and save them to a common location. And then therefore you can use this process. Another thing you might have is that often vendors will email you their invoices in PDF form already. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up an email. And anywhere on any screen where there's a paperclip, I can highlight an attachment and drag it and drop it, and that'll automatically load the invoice that was emailed to me, attach it along with the receipt and the purchase order. So you can drag and drop information from emails or open Windows Explorer windows directly onto a screen in Adagio that has a paperclip on it. So once you've attached documents, you can see that there's a column that indicates there's a link in case you need to ensure that you have documents attached before you post. I'm going to go ahead and post this batch, make it sure it's ready to post. And I'll go ahead and post that. And that will generate transactions for the vendors. It will also send a batch to GL. And the batch that goes to GL will also maintain those transactions. And that will be available for every account that gets touched by the transaction. So the expense accounts, the payables control account. The bank will be available for checks and so on. So if we go ahead, we'll go back to the vendor in just a minute. What other areas can you attach and use DocStore in Adagio Payables? Well, another place you can access DocStore and have a little bit of setup involved is the banks. You can see you can link transactions directly to the bank itself, not necessarily to a specific transaction, but perhaps there's a service agreement that you'd like to attach to the bank. And more interestingly, on the specifications tab, there will be a doc storage form that will store usually a remittance advice. So every time that you print a check or run an electronic fund transfer, a particular form will be used that will most likely look as like a remittance advice, and that will be attached to the manual check or the system check. So that's something that you will probably want to set up before you start printing checks or doing electronic fund transfers and payables. When it comes time to doing those payments, whether you're doing a system check run or manual check batch, and whether you're doing electronic fund transfers or printing checks to paper, you can actually view the invoices that you want to pay. So let's just regenerate that list. And you can take a look when you highlight a particular invoice that's been linked, you can see the invoice that you're about to pay before you pay it. This is also available to show through control payments if you want to see a control payment image of the invoice before you put it on hold or force it to pay. When you print a set of system checks, that will generate that remittance advice using that doc storage spec for each of the payments that you do to each vendor. Similarly, if we go to a manual check batch, I'm going to go ahead and create a new payment. And I'll pick that easy that I just posted to just a moment ago. You can see that not only did you show the list of invoices, but if there's an attachment, then you can see that attachment while you're within manual check batch entry, so you can see whether it's appropriate to pay or to partially pay. So I'm going to go ahead and print that check and pay the invoice. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and print this batch. And it'll be going off to the printer or whatever the process. Okay, and it's printed. Were everything printed okay? Yes. I'm not going to worry about additional forms for the demo here. But we always clear advice information because we're supposed to. Now if we take a look at the batch, we could see the remittance advice that was set from that doc storage form that we set on the bank, and then each of the invoices that we paid. And of course there's the receipt, and there's another receipt, and another receipt, and the purchase order. So you can see the entire flow of transactions going all the way back to the purchase order, or in the case of receivables, the sales order, when that comes. Let's go ahead and post this batch. So we've posted a few batches now. Let's take a look at the vendors before we move on. On the vendors themselves, you can also attach and view PDF documents that are not necessarily related to transactions. Perhaps you have a service agreement, or maybe you have a voided check that you sent your vendor, or perhaps there's other sorts of documents that are specific to the vendor, instructions, customs related things, anything that you might have that's associated with the vendor that's not necessarily specific to a transaction. So you can attach and view transactions directly to the vendor. If we go ahead to the Transactions tab, for all any of the invoices or manual checks or anything else that has an attachment, you can again view the payment advice and all the different transactions associated with it. Notice that there's also an attachment here. So you don't have to attach only at the batch level, but if you've forgotten to attach a transaction document at the time of batch entry, it's not too late. You can come to the vendor transaction inquiry here and attach the transaction. I'm not going to actually do that, but just to show that I can say new and do an attachment here if I needed to. Whether it's to scan or attach something that's available. I should also point out on the screen that if you are attaching from a common location on your hard disk and you want to move it, then there's a move option that will remove the source PDF and only save it in the place where Adagio DocStore stores its PDFs. So we've gone through a bunch of things that you can do in Adagio Payables. Let's just take a break for just a moment, and I'd like to ask a second of two poll questions. We've seen a number of different ways that you can attach documents. We've seen scanning, we've seen attaching the hard disk, you can print them. And so I'd just be curious to know, for all the people who are watching today, how might you choose to attach documents to your transactions? Choose all that apply. The actual document itself, the invoice or the remittance advice, dragging it from an email, using a scanner, or browsing for a PDF that's saved directly on your hard disk. I imagine most of those might be used, but just which ones would you use? See, we're probably, we're about 3/4 of the way through, just a couple more minutes. All right, so I'll just close the poll now. We're now at 90%. So for the people in the audience today, it's just coming up now. You have the opportunity. I see most people will be choosing to drag from email and scanning, and maybe less so for saving them to disk first. And also the archiving, not going to be as much, but you should be aware that that's something that's automatically done for you. You don't even have to think about it. It's done automatically if you set archive PDF copies in the company profile. Okay, thank you for that. So let's move over to Adagio Ledger. We're getting close to the end. There's just a few things I wanted to show here. Let's go ahead and retrieve the batches. I happen to have some from Payables that we've just posted and also from order entry. I'll go ahead and retrieve those. And if we take a look at the batches, here's our invoice batch 12. And you can see that there's our attachments. Oops. And so there's our document from our invoice and the receipt and the purchase order and so on. Oops. So what I'm going to do is then actually I'll also do the manual check batch. So there's the payment advice and there's an invoice to pay and so on. So whether it was an invoice or a manual check batch or anything you retrieve, if there are documents attached in the subledger, those will come through to the ledger itself. So I'm going to go ahead and post all of these payables batches that were retrieved. Make them ready to post. Oops. Select them all and post. Now that we can actually look at them in the posted transactions drill down as well. So if we maintain that, oops, sorry, wrong place, not edit accounts, my mistake, sorry. View transactions, and I've marked the transaction I want to look at. All the transactions that had documents available to be linked will be here. So I can view them directly from here, depending on the flow. And so I happen to be looking just directly at the invoice, at the expense account, but whichever account was touched by the posting, whether it was the bank account or whether it was a control account, you have the opportunity of viewing from there. And as we saw at the beginning of the demonstration, you can also go to the financial statement designer in order to be able to generate transactions and see them from there. If you're using Adagio Grid View, version 9.3a, a similar ability of linking from an inquiry is possible. So I'm just going to load a very simple transactions-based vendor workspace that I created. And if you generate using Adagio Grid View version 9.3a and putting a doc link column, you have the opportunity of listing a transaction and viewing the link, just like you can in the accounting. So you have the opportunity of giving someone external to the accounting the ability of viewing these PDFs, perhaps an auditor. So there's lots of different places where you can attach transactions, and you can also view them as well. Before I end the webinar for the demonstration part, I should also just mention, for those of you who've been using ePrint, this will not be new, but for those of you who aren't ePrint users, just to highlight the fact that for any of the reports, you can choose to print this directly to a PDF with particular options. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Ledger rather than Payables, because that's more interesting. And I'll do a posting journal. And you can set options such as the fiscal year and the posting sequence, and just the last sequence only. So I'm just going to go ahead and generate that PDF, and that will get saved to the 2008 Posting Journal Sequence 300 to the folder that I've specified in the audit directory, and it'll pop up in just a second. And so there's our posting journal for the batches that we just posted just a few moments ago. And so that's filed away. And so not only do you have your transactions, but also your reports that you can save to PDF with Adagio DocStore. So we spent about half an hour. And if this is the taste and you know that this is something that's interesting for your company to use, how do you get the Adagio DocStore? I really want this. As I mentioned before, if you are a user of Adagio ePrint and we're on a current upgrade support plan, you get this automatically. The upgrade emails have been sent to you, so you have the ability of downloading it and installing it. If you were not an Adagio ePrint user on a current combined plan, the retail price of Adagio DocStore is $3,200 Canadian, plus the standard annual maintenance upgrades fee of $640. So the initial cost would be $38.40. If you use Adagio Cloud, I believe ePrint is a part of the core suite, but for an additional $80 a month, you can have the ePrint upgraded to Adagio DocStore. One thing I should mention is that because scanners are locally attached, the way that it works right now, at the current time, scanning is not available if you're using the cloud implementation of Adagio DocStore. And please do contact your Adagio consultant, whether it's for doing a demonstration or placing an order. They're going to be able to assist you and help you how to set up the appropriate way and the most efficient way for how you do your business, how the transactions and documents come in, and how best to attach things up. So thank you so much for spending half an hour of your time here. I realize that we maxed out our attendance today, which is fabulous. Again, we do have a recording of the session to peruse for later. And now what I'll do is just open up the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the questions area of the control panel. And Andrew, if you want to modify and modulate that, just to see if there's any questions that we can answer live for the people who are attending today.
That was a great demo, Warren, and I think you managed to cover most of the questions that people had during the presentation. One that came up that I think you could talk to was whether the drill down in the GL requires that the transactions be posted in detail from the subledger into the GL. So perhaps you could address what happens. You don't have to demonstrate it, but
sure.
What happens when people consolidate their general ledger transactions in the subledger?
Okay, so there's a few different ways that you can consolidate transactions for ledger. There could be a setting on the account that's posted as consolidated. Or in a subledger program, you may choose to print and post the GL transactions report and choose to consolidate. Or perhaps you're running a function that has some sort of level of consolidation, such as system check runs and having the bank account portions consolidated. You do not lose the DocStore transaction linking if you consolidate transactions. You get them. What will happen is all of those transactions that will be consolidated together will be lumped into the one consolidated entry. So if you're paying 100 checks and you consolidate those into the bank account, when you look at the bank account entry in the GL, you'll see all 100 checks that consolidated together to make that a consolidated amount. So you will not lose the detail in regards of what you see for the linking. It just means that you'll have a lot of transactions to go through if you desire to do that. So if you want to keep separate transactions with their separate links, then consolidating wouldn't be the way to go. But if you do consolidate, you will not lose your DocStore linking abilities.
Great. There have been some other questions coming in that I'm answering as fast as I can. I think that can you attach entries done directly in the GL? So your system, your demo showed them flowing from the subledgers, but you might want to point out that when you're entering a batch, you can attach a document directly to the batch header or onto a specific line detail of the journal entry. So you can, if you're just using a separate sale. Another thing that I might mention is that you can also import documents into DocStore if you are importing batches of transactions from external systems. If your import format includes a full path to the PDF, then you can then that document will be automatically attached into the batch that's created. And one final clarification on something that Warren mentioned in passing on the last slide. The MSRP, the suggested retail price of Adagio DocStore is $3,200 plus $640 annual upgrades in Canadian and US dollars, depending upon which side of the border you're on. But the dollar value is constant. We are not worrying about exchange rates at this time. So I think I'll just keep answering. Someone has asked, someone did make the comment that they thought that the product was expensive. It is definitely more expensive than other Adagio modules, but we did a pretty comprehensive survey of document storage and other electronic solutions that are available in the marketplace, and we didn't find a single one available under $5,000 US dollars, and most hovered around the $10,000 to $15,000 mark, and way higher, of course, and also did not provide any integration with the accounting. So this is truly a unique solution. And one thing to let you know is that it doesn't matter how many documents you attach to a transaction, there is no performance hit in Adagio from the attachment of documents to transactions in a subledger. So when you're attaching documents and posting those documents, even if an invoice in a consolidated invoice journal batch into the GL has 250 documents attached, it will post with the same speed as it did before you implemented DocStore. I think that's pretty much. There's some other questions here that that I can answer. Can you attach copy of signed checks to a check batch after posting? Yes, you can, but you have to scan the checks afterwards, and I think you may find that that's quite tedious. But you might want to do that in the case of completely manual checks that are written, but the machine printed checks, your system check run, I'm not sure that you'd want to go to that trouble, because you can make your remittance advice look like a check. And you probably find that it would be easier to go into the check and unattach or delete the document that's automatically attached from the thing. So there, I think that kind of answers all the questions. You have a link. There is a survey as you exit the webinar. If you, it shouldn't take very long to fill out. We're very interested in your feedback about your about this product, and we look forward to hearing more about how people are putting this to use. I was interested to see the survey results about how you expect to attach your documents. I think that once you start using DocStore, you may change. You may find that it's easier to scan to a central folder and then pick up from a centralized folder in the accounting department once invoices have been approved out in the field. So I think that that's where we'll end for the day. I'll finish answering the questions. For those of you who have outstanding questions, I'll just get around to answer them to you personally, and I think that we're good to go. So thank you very much for attending the webinar today. I'll end the webinar for everybody, and look forward to seeing you a little bit, seeing your feedback on the tech support forum over the coming weeks. Thank you for attending, everybody. Bye.